The China threat deepens. President Biden is now warning that China is making advancements in transportation, giving an advantage over the United States. This following a 2-hour phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is his first call since becoming president, the first call with China. But these recent comments contradict remarks made back in May of 2019, where he dismissed the idea that China posed a real threat to the United States. Watch.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not competition for us. I was on the phone for 2 straight hours with Xi Jinping. If we don't get moving, they're going to eat our lunch.
Joining me right now is Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. Senator, it's good to see you today. Thanks for being here. Do you think President Biden is better understanding the threat that China represents?
Maria, I would hope that he would better understand this. We are working every day to protect U.S. companies, U.S. innovators, and intellectual property rights holders that are being adversely impacted by the Chinese Communist Party. And for the president to come around to having a better understanding of this, I hope it will be reflected in his cabinet choices and his administration choices. China is not our friend. They are our adversary. They practice civil military fusion. You never know where one piece ends, the other begins. Huawei needs to continue to be blocked. We do not need them in the systems of the USA or our allies. We need to continue to have this administration support the Clean Network Plan that Secretary Pompeo had in place, because China is intent on 21st century global domination. The sooner President Biden realizes that, the sooner he admits this and stands up against the Chinese Communist Party, the better off this country, our innovators and our manufacturers will be.
You know, I remember during the Trump administration, they had a real hard time getting the Chinese Communist Party to admit that they had been stealing intellectual property for decades. And then during 2020, we saw a string of indictments about that. Where John Ratcliffe, the former director of national intelligence, told me the theme in China is rob, replicate, replace. They rob and steal intellectual property. They replicate the business, and then eventually they will replace your business. And that is basically eating your lunch. What do you think will be the most important measure that President Biden needs to attack? Because there are so many issues. You mentioned Huawei, keeping it on the entities list, or the human rights, moves where you've got 1 million Uyghurs in camps right now in China. Or it's that theft, that intellectual property theft, where they're stealing from our companies and ultimately replacing them on the world stage.
That is right. And the rob, replicate, and replace, it affects Tennessee manufacturers. We are constantly working with manufacturers who have had their intellectual property stolen. They go into China thinking that they can produce something there. It may be something that's a tool and die or an aftermarket auto parts component. It may be a battery. And eventually what happens is the rob, replicate, and replace. Also, being certain that we maintain this clean network is an imperative. We know that Huawei, working with the Chinese Communist Party, is seeking to build a database, a global database of images, of your data. And this is why the conversation you were just having about big tech is so relevant to China. And then also DNA. When you look at healthcare data, they want to build this, so then they own all the information about who you are, where you go. As you've heard me say, they would own your virtual you, which is you and your presence online. They know how to market back into you. And big China, big tech, big media, they're all in this together. This is why I have filed my virtual you protection agenda, the Browser Act, the privacy bill that I have worked on since 2012 for online privacy. so that you own your data and the Chinese Communist Party does not have access to it. Big tech does not have access to it.
Yeah, thank you for all you're doing, Senator. I know we've talked about this issue many times, and you obviously have very clear-eyed assessment of what has taken place and the threats that could take place. Let me ask you about big tech while we're on this subject. Are you going to be able to do anything in terms of, nipping their wings in terms of the dominance that we're seeing, the idea that they, too, are monitoring people's information? We just did a story about Instagram monitoring your private messages to people. Will you be able to move the needle on Section 230, which pretty much protects these companies from any lawsuits, even though there's so much, misinformation on social media? They can't get sued.
Maria, I think the first thing that may happen is online privacy, so that you, the individual, have control of your information online. And you would have to give explicit consent for one of these big tech platforms to have access to your information. So privacy, online privacy with one set of rules for the entire internet ecosystem and one regulator may be what you see move forward first. That would force big tech to rework their business model because of the way, they're paid by the number of eyeballs they control.